All right, welcome to another episode of Lifting and Yapping. Today I'm going to be talking all about the GPP Combine, or the GPP metrics that we've established as the ultimate test of your general physical preparedness. Myself and Jacob, we worked on these tests while we were over in Bali, and we agreed that if you score high in every single one of these tests, you are truly generally physically prepared. Now, obviously, boiling down physical preparation into just 5 tests, it's always going to be controversial because obviously there's a whole bunch of things that we're not explicitly testing. But one of our goals was to, make sure that it didn't explode out to a battery of over 20 different tests or something like that. We want these to be a battery of tests that you can get through in 1 or 2 days and to be as well-rounded as a representation of true general physical preparedness, at least as myself and Jacob in our community see it. So obviously there are some things in there that are a little bit specific to the way that we view training and physical preparedness and some of our biases, but I would say that there's an implicit bias in the way that anyone would develop a testing system like this. So I'll get into some of our decision making behind the test that we did choose, and then some of the things that are most commonly brought up as, things that might be missing from the GPP Combine that are representation of general physical preparedness, but I think we've covered that, and I'll give you our logic behind it as well as just outlining exactly what they are. Just let me get into a warm-up set. So building up to heavy clean plus 2 jerks today, in between sort of responding to our thought process behind the GPP Combine test metrics. So the reason we're doing clean plus 2 jerks is because my jerks have just been down bad lately. I mean, training as a whole is not great after going to the Bali for the second time in a year and getting a hectic stomach bug again. But I would say in spite of all that, I'm exactly where I should be in terms of the physical qualities at this stage of the off-season. So we've got about 8 weeks left of true off-season, and then we'll be starting to sign up for some meets and really trying to just tick off that sub 1200 meters. But the micro goal of the off-season, other than to just improve my sprinting times, was to cross off 140 kilo clean and jerk. But I just keep flying to foreign lands in pursuit of waves and shitting like crazy. But I'm back in a country that has clean drinking water, and we'll see what that does for my clean and jerk numbers. Okay, so the test to find out your GPP score and how generally physically prepared you are, we've got your max velocity, which we'll be measuring with a 10-meter fly. You can have as much of a run up as you need to get up to your top speed. We've got a 5-kilometer run. We've got max squat, max bench press, power clean, and then your standing vert. So you're allowed a counter movement. We're just not allowed to do any sort of approach vert. And we honestly feel like with those 5 tests, they're such a great measure of your general physical preparedness. Anything that we're not explicitly testing, we still have a good enough proxy for, in my opinion. Keeping in mind the fact that we didn't want it to explode out to 20 tests, which it very easily could, especially when you start to entertain certain conversations like, well, what about throwing? And again, this is one of the things that I was pretty keen to have in the GPP testing combine, some sort of throw, but Jacob pointed out to me, and I think he's right, if you've got a beast of a squat, you've got a really explosive lower half in terms of having decent max velocity, having a decent vertical jump, and you've got a decent bench press, there's no way you're going to be bad at throwing. And again, you could say that, it's like, oh, there's no way you'd have a bad power clean if you've got a really good squat and you've got a really good vert or something like that. But again, there's a little bit of personal biases in the way we like to train, but we do think that it stands the test as a true measure of general physical preparedness for those reasons. If you're a beast in all of these things, there's one thing that I can come up with that you're not guaranteed to be an absolute weapon at. Let me do another set, and then I'll get into what I think is actually Let me do another set, and then we'll get into what I think is the biggest thing missing from our GPP score. But I'm leaving it out deliberately because I just also want to make it accessible to as many people as possible. And honestly, it's mainly just me handicapping myself. Now, in my opinion, the biggest gap in our GPP metrics is 60% of the planet is covered in water and there's no test of swimming. But like, this also comes down to one of those things where like when people think of general physical preparedness, I feel like they go sort of one way or the other. Typically, they're sort of thinking about things like zombie apocalypse. It's like, well, you know, we're also not testing your ability to gather firewood, light that up, figure out what food's poisonous or not going to kill you, and managing a resource supply and things like that. So there's a certain point where that line of thinking gets out of hand. But then also it's like, you know, what is general physical preparedness in 2024? I mean, if you wanted to do the most survivable setup with your video game character, you'd probably just spec into being a wizard at Excel spreadsheets or something like that. So trying to come up with something that, like I said, is a realistic representation of general physical preparedness in 2024 without having over 20 tests, without forcing everyone to go into the ocean and figure out if they can survive in there. I feel like where we landed is pretty fucking reasonable. Like I said, the only other thing that I was flirting with throwing in there was some sort of throwing test. Like, I don't know, I just think it's fun to train throwing and I think it's fun to test throwing. So that may be something that we add in there. But like I said, I'm on the fan of, where possible, trying to reduce the amount of tests, especially when a combination of these tests serves as a good enough proxy for those. So again, I agree with Jacob when he says if you have the strong and explosive lower body and you've got a relatively strong upper body, you're going to have a decent throwing arm on you. I think that putting swimming in there, I think that is a really good measure of general physical preparedness, but it just writes off anyone who can't swim from participating in this thing. And I want to maximize the amount of participation in it, see how many people we can get competing against each other to get the highest GPP score. We're going to have leaderboards for this thing once we work out what our formula for this is and how we're going to weight each of those. One of the things where we are testing it, but people might feel like we're not testing it enough, is the endurance side of things. So we captured a 5-kilometer run, mainly because the hybrid thing is so trendy right now. I would say the most common way to do your hybrid training is to prepare for things like marathon distances, or at least half marathon distances, and then still participating in the powerlift. So trying to provide something that's a little bit different to the market, that is going to encourage people to prepare and train a little bit more generally and train a little bit more variously, I feel like this is a really, really good test. And at the end of the day, if you're an absolute weapon on the 5K, like well under sub 20 minutes, my argument is that you would be able to battle your way through a marathon. And I don't need any more endurance than that, realistically. Some people might find that controversial, but yeah, I just think if you've got a sub 20-minute 5K, it's really just mental toughness to get through a marathon. I'm not saying you'll have an amazing marathon time, but you'll be able to get the job done better than a lot of people. Whereas again, what we feel like is missing from the hybrid community is a lot more of the high horsepower, high velocity stuff, like max velocity, power cleans, adding in like vertical jumps or plyometrics of any sort of kind. We're really G'd up about that sort of stuff. But I'd be curious to hear what your guys' ideas of tests for true measures of general physical preparedness would be. We've had so many people just throw out the craziest ideas, and I think it really just speaks to people's biases with the way that they train. Like, a lot of people are like, what about Turkish get-up? What about lifting a sandbag? I shouldn't be doing that funny voice when I'm impersonating people in our community, but I thought that they were pretty absurd suggestions, but maybe you could just rationalize your thoughts behind it. Like, this is another thing. So maybe odd implements, we should have something in there like a stone, because I agree, not everything out there in life has handles that are purpose-built for lifting. So maybe we do need some sort of odd lifting or grip test in there. Again, I feel like we're sort of testing grip enough with the power clean and stuff like that. Like, you can't have a completely dog shit grip, but maybe grip is so important to some people as a measure of general physical preparedness. So if you're interested in figuring out your GPP score and putting yourself through these tests, me and Jacob were actually promoting this public GPP combine. Initially, it was sort of a testing day. We decided to finally launch some premium one-to-one coaching, but we're doing things a little bit differently. Like I said, originally this testing week that was starting on the 30th of September, so the next Monday coming up, the main goal of it was just going to be a testing day for our premium one-to-one clients who are getting the customized programming. But what we realized is that just releasing like a launch-based coaching offer. So every 12 weeks, we're just going to take on 15 to 20 people and put them through this GPP combine, 12 weeks of intensive training, and then try to retest all those scores. But we've sort of already got the GPP program where, again, it's not customized programming, but you can follow along with our GPP programming for as little as $1 a day, get community support, get form checks from myself, and just if you've got any questions about your training or the programming. And so as part of the marketing for the GPP Combine, we're like, yeah, it's individualized coaching. And on top of us preparing you for the GPP Combine, we can also help prepare you for an event or some sort of specific goal that you have. And then everyone that reached out for the GPP Combine coaching, they seemed more motivated to train for their specific event or their specific goals more so than the GPP coaching. So like, all right, let's change the focus, because we had so many people who didn't sign up for the GPP Combine coaching that were really, really keen on participating. So we'll just go back to using the GPP group program if you're looking for cheap, accessible coaching, just to get more generally physically prepared or specifically to bring up your GPP combine score. That's the way to go about that, as well as getting the community support. If you're looking for one-to-one coaching, me and Jacob are just opening up our books now. Whether you want individualized programming to bring up your GPP tests, or like I said, if you just want someone to handle your strength and conditioning for if you've got an event that you're preparing for, such as a triathlon, or if you're in your off season for team sports or heading into season for team sports, and you want someone to handle all the weightlifting or the sprinting and that side of things, just bring up your physical qualities, level up that video game character, just contact Jacob through Instagram, or it's better if you email me. I'll try to keep an eye on my DMs for coaching inquiries, but yeah, if you want help with that side of things from me, please reach out to my email. I'll leave it in the show notes down below. But yeah, so just as a reminder, starting the 30th of September, myself and Jacob, we're going to be putting, and the GPP community, going to be testing ourselves at the GPP Combine, and then a really intense 12 weeks of training leading into the track season for me, and then doing another GPP Combine testing day at the end of that 12 weeks. I think it's going to be the second or third week of December where that second GPP Combine testing week falls. So if you're excited, whether it's handling your own programming for that side of things or hopping in with the GPP group program, we're really, really excited for this upcoming test. It's going to be a heap of fun. I have an identity as someone who can clean and jerk 120 kilos even on their worst day. That's all right, we'll just pivot, just get the reps in. Jesus Christ. This 12 weeks is going to be very healing for me. Just bringing the physical qualities up, getting serious about training again. Like this testing day that's coming up in a week. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to hit like most of my old numbers, but some of it could be dicey. I might regress in a couple of them. But whatever, it's just your GPP scores, your GPP score. It's got to stand by the test and the testing system. Again, let's see where I'm at the end of the 12 weeks. Some of the other potential gaps that people have brought up with the GPP metrics was it is all very sagittal plane dominant, but I would say that life is reasonably sagittal plane dominant. Like I don't live my life like a fucking crab. I realize multi-directional movement is a part of sports and things like that, but again, my argument would be that if you have a decent max velocity, your mobility is going to be decent enough to get outside the sagittal plane and embrace some sort of lateral or multi-directional movement. Again, we're not testing it explicitly, but just the mobility demands of high-speed running are pretty great. Like if you're over 9 meters a second, I'd say that you can't do that being absolutely stiff as a board. If you're not stiff as a board and you're reasonably mobile, in terms of like have decent speed, yeah, you'll have decent lateral movement. Decent enough, in my opinion, without explicitly testing it. One of the other things I was really keen to include some sort of test for, but again, we achieved it by proxy, is like some sort of cali or body weight manipulation. But again, I think if you've got a decent 5K time, decent max velocity, decent vert, decent power clean, squat and bench, you're gonna have a great power to weight ratio anyway. There's no way you're gonna be big and blown up, or if you do, you're still gonna have good enough work capacity and good enough power to weight ratio. So I feel like we've got the cali and the body weight side of things included by proxy pretty well, like about as good as you could reasonably expect. It's included by proxy about as well as you could want it to be without explicitly testing it. So to summarize the deficits that we're acknowledging in the GPP metrics, there's no swimming or water-based stuff in there. That is done for accessibility. There's nothing longer than 5 kilometers, but again, if you're an absolute beast in the 5K, you're going to be able to suffer through and just tank some pretty long endurances. There's no throwing, but again, if you have an explosive lower body and a strong upper body, you're going to be able to throw decently. There's no multi-directional movement, but again, if you have decent max velocity, there's no way that you can't move sideways, in my opinion. And I think we covered the Cali thing as well. Again, all of these tests, you're going to have a decent power to weight ratio, so odds are you'll be decent at manipulating your own body weight. For 5 tests, I think we did really well. You could cut it down even further. You could argue, is the power clean really necessary? It's just that it's something that has been a big part of my training. I really enjoy it. A lot of the GPP community seem to really love their Olympic lifts. Like when I go through the group chat for the GPP program, the lifts that people are asking for the most feedback on and the ones that they're most excited to PB are the Olympic lifts. So it's more of a branding and a personal bias thing why we included that in the GPP score. And at the end of the day, even if you're not that exposed to Olympic weightlifting, you'll be able to figure out how to power clean decently if you're generally physically prepared. So it's not like it's erecting this weird barrier to people who haven't Olympic lifted before. It's not that hard to figure them out. We've reached out to a bunch of people who are good with maths and good with stats to help us develop a GPP score. And something that's come up in the conversation about, how will we weight all of these events? And again, we haven't even completed that conversation. Maybe we should have them weighted all evenly, but thinking about if any quality underpins general physical preparedness more than any other one, maybe it is the aerobic system. So maybe it's worth weighting that a little bit more heavily because when you play in sports, especially sports that go longer than 2 minutes, and life is a sport that goes longer than 2 minutes most of the time, as soon as you're tired, every other physical quality goes to shit. Like as soon as you're gassed, you're no longer strong. As soon as you're gassed, you're no longer fast. As soon as you're gassed, your decision-making ability goes to shit as well. So I don't know. But then again as well, I don't think it's... I think power is sexy. It's definitely something that people are really excited to train right now. I think everything can kind of just turn into an endurance event if you're too honest about how that relates to general physical preparedness. But yeah, I can see the justification for weighting the endurance test a little bit more highly, but then it's is it hypocritical to weight an endurance test that highly and only be testing up to 20 minutes of endurance? Or like I said, if you're not close to a 20-minute 5K, you need to get your general physical preparedness up, in my opinion. And something else I'm curious to hear from you guys is, who do you think is going to have the highest ranking? Because we're going to have separate leaderboards for men and women, and we're going to have region-specific leaderboards. But out of all the hybrid or GPP influencers that are out there at the moment, honestly, I think I'm going to be pretty high up on that leaderboard because there is, when I think of all the people in my community and in my social circle that I think would score highly, there's always just one test where I think they're going to get absolutely flogged. A lot of people have been mentioning Will Rattel as someone who's going to dominate every single one of these tests, and Will definitely crush a lot of them. I'm very curious to see what that man's 5K is, but then again, Will does have a lot of hidden talent, so maybe he's not a complete slug on that 5K as well. But Alec Blennis has been brought up. Again, he's going to absolutely demolish that 5K. He is strong, but then again, his Olympic weightlifting will probably hold him back a little bit. And I don't know what his vert's like. I think his max velocity is pretty good. He looks like he's above 9 meters a second. CISA training, probably not going to see his GPP scores because I'll absolutely clean him in everything. Atlas, he claims to be generally physically prepared. I don't think he'll be showing up for the GPP test. Again, I'll pay him $1,000 to go through it and publicly submit his scores, but I don't think. Atlas, please do my GPP test. Please. If you want to train like me, we've got the program down below. If you want individualized coaching to help prepare you for some sort of event or personal goal, DM Jacob on Instagram or send me an email. If you want to get into content creation, you check out the ebook down below. If you want a free plyometric program, you can get that down below as well. Just check out what's down below. There's some good shit down there. GPP score will be coming hopefully by the end of 2025. Again, testing day starts 30th of September. I'll talk to you later.